What's up, you guys? I'm Jasper, and this is JJ Vids. Welcome to the channel, and today we're going to be discussing all the cars that I have ever owned, going from the very first car I've ever had when I was 16 years old, just getting my driver's license, all the cars in between, and then up to right now, having multiple cars and showing them to you guys on the YouTube channel. And we got quite a big list, about 8 cars to go over today, so without further ado, we're going to hop right into today's video, so stay tuned. To begin this list of all the cars that I ever owned, going from the very first car I ever had when I was 16 years old, up until all the cars that I have right now with the YouTube channel, we're going to start off with number 1, the 1997 Honda Civic EX Coupe. And this was the very first car that I ever owned right when I got my driver's license. And this car has a bit of a story. Only owned it for 2.5 months to begin with. The first couple weeks I was driving this car was amazing. First time in my life I ever had my freedom and I was able to go places by myself. One day I was driving this car, I noticed that the temperature gauge was reading all the way sky high in the red, so I immediately pulled over, and as I pulled over, the car began to ride like really, really rough, like a movie. So I ended up calling a tow truck, getting it towed to a mechanic, and whether or not that was true at the time, the mechanic told me that this car needed a new motor. And obviously this was a huge blow. I just started driving this car being 16. I ended up putting a new motor in this thing, and this was $1,500 out of my pocket at the time. And I ended up driving the car for another month after that. And one day I was driving home. On the freeway, and the traffic went from 60 miles an hour to 0 miles an hour in a matter of like 500 feet. And I tried braking, and the brakes on this car completely locked up and did not work. And I ended up just sliding right into the car in front of me and rear-ending that car, which ended up kind of totaling that Civic, technically. We ended up fixing that car and not reporting it to insurance. I ended up having to fix the other car that I rear-ended as well. And so far, this is not really going well with my first car. Blown motor, rear-ending a car, pretty bad. So I end up fixing the car, drive it a little bit more, and no joke, 2 weeks later, I'm driving home on the same freeway, same thing, and the brakes fail on me again. And I end up rear-ending another car, but this time it causes a 4-car collision, which includes like a bunch of really expensive cars. And this was 2 days before summer break when I was a junior in high school, and I was relying on the Civic to commute from work and back to the job I just got that I was going to be working the whole summer. So totaled the car that day. Don't end up repairing it again, and the Honda Civic dies that day. And this whole summer, I end up having to Uber there and back from work. And that is the story of my very first car, the 1997 Honda Civic EX Coupe. The second car I owned flows right into this story. Right after this whole summer, not having a car, working a full-time job, Ubering from work and back, I managed to save up about $2,500. So at the very end of the summer, I went out and I found this 1997 Ford Ranger with 150,000 miles and a salvage title. And I bought this car for like $2,300. And it was a cool experience because I had a really bad taste in my mouth with my first car being the Honda Civic with everything that happened. And for the second car I owned, I wanted to get into something completely different. This was a truck, and I just wanted to start off on a clean slate. And this was the 1997 Ford Ranger, and I ended up driving this car for about 8 months. And in the middle of the ownership of this Ford Ranger, I actually bought my third car, and this was a car I owned for a very short amount of time, and that was a 2003 Dodge Neon that I bought for $250 with a clean title and really clogged catalytic converters. And for those of you who don't know what a catalytic converter is, it's the part of the exhaust that helps with the emissions. But when the catalytic converter clogs in your car, you basically lose all power because there's no more flow out of the exhaust. It's just clogged. And this Neon had a very clogged cat. So whenever you would press on the gas, when I left that guy's house buying that car, driving it back to my house, I stepped on the gas, the thing wouldn't go over 30 miles an hour because it just had no power and no flow through the exhaust. So it was definitely an adventure driving that car an hour and a half from where I bought it back to my house. but I ended up doing an exhaust on that car and a few Rice things to try and fix the clogged cat, which I didn't end up fixing. And I just kind of gave up on that car, and I sold it 2-3 months later for like $450 without a title. But that's the Dodge Neon. To go back to the Ford Ranger, I still had this car once I sold that Dodge Neon, and I kept the car for maybe 2 or 3 more months, and I noticed that the transmission was starting to slip in this Ford Ranger. So I posted it up for sale. I found somebody who wanted to buy it, and he ended up getting the car. The transmission didn't slip while he was driving it. It was a great deal. Never really heard from him again. And that was the 1997 Ford Ranger. And going into the 4th car that I've owned, and this was the first car that I actually took an automotive passion and love into. Unlike all the other cars before, where it was either just for fun or it was just strictly a mode of transportation to get from point A to point B. This 4th car was the car that I actually did things to and actually grew a big connection to. And this was the 1997 Lexus SC300 Coupe. And this thing was thrashed with 6 owners and 300,000 miles. I pulled up to buy this car in the ghetto of LA, paid like $2,000, drove it home, and I loved the way this car performed. I loved the motor in the SC300, the 2JZ GE naturally aspirated 3-liter inline-6 motor. This is the same motor that I have in my current Lexus wagon, and the SC300 didn't handle well or anything like that. But like I said, I fell in love with the motor, and really I fell in love with the interior and the quality that went around Lexuses. Opening up the door handle, touching anything on the interior, comparing it to a Toyota, a Dodge Neon, a Ford Ranger, or a Honda Civic. This Lexus was at a different level of quality, and I took note of that. And I ended up driving this car for 8 months and selling it because I wanted to get something a little bit more new and modern. And it's important to mention that this was the first car that I ever did stuff to. I did a full exhaust on this Lexus that I wanted to do, and I did a full sound system in this car with a JLW0 in the rear deck, accompanied by JBL speakers off Amazon. It wasn't a great system, but it was an effort. And I ended up selling this car 8 months later because I wanted to get something a little bit more new and modern and perhaps safe. And this leads us into the 5th vehicle I've ever owned, and that is the 2013 Scion FRS. And I pulled up to a dealership to buy this car. It was the second owner. It had 81,000 miles on it, and I paid $13,200 for this car. And this was way more money than I ever paid for any other car. And this was also the first car that I financed or had a payment on. And it was a great payment because I had great experience with this FRS. I did a TRD exhaust on this car. I threw 2 Alpine Type R subwoofers in the trunk of this thing in a ported box that sounded really, really good. And it was a lot of fun for like 8 months, 9 months in this car. Drove it for about 30,000 miles. And I ended up selling this car because halfway into the ownership of the Scion FRS, I discovered the Lexus IS300 Sport Cross. And you guys, the first picture I saw of the Sport Cross, I knew I was going to have one. And I was premeditating the plan in my mind of how I'm going to get one of these cars and what I'm going to do if I did get one of these cars. And I did research on the Lexus IS300 Sport Cross, and it didn't take me long to find out that they never made the wagon variant of the Lexus IS300 in a 5-speed manual in North America. So right when I found that out, I knew I was going to manual swap it because I wasn't going to leave my 6-speed Scion FRS to go into a older automatic Lexus. I had to make it manual. So the 6th car on our list, which is by far my favorite car, the car I've done the most miles with, the car I've done the most modifications to, and just the car I've spent overall the most time and effort in. And that is the 2002 Lexus IS300 Sport Cross. And I can make a whole YouTube video off of this car alone, and I probably will, so I'm going to keep it short and simple with this. This car I bought in San Francisco off of an old lady who bought this car new in 2002, and this Lexus only had 86,000 original miles on it, and I ended up negotiating down the price with her. I'm not going to tell you that in this video. We'll make a separate video for that, but I bought the car, drove it back down to Southern California where I live, and we ended up doing the manual transmission swap 6 months later, doing the full JL Audio sound system with Focal speakers, doing coilovers, doing modifications to the motor, and doing a lot of other stuff, including trips, adventures, YouTube videos, and so much more. And that is the Lexus IS300 Sport Cross. There's going to be way more content to be coming on that car, and that's my favorite car out of this whole list. Sixth car I've ever owned, 2002 Lexus IS300 Sport Cross. Now, going into the seventh car I've ever owned, and this is something I've had for a long time, and I could have put this earlier on the list, but I kept it farther back because it's just kind of the secondary car, and that's the 2012 Toyota Tacoma double cab, long bed, four-wheel drive, automatic transmission with a lot of TRD bolt-on parts and great modifications done to that truck. I've been recently shooting a lot of YouTube videos about this truck. I hope you guys go and watch those. But the Tacoma is a support vehicle. This truck will never go anywhere, and this is something that'll always be a part of me and the channel. And there's just a lot of sentimental connection to this truck because my dad bought this truck new back in the day, and it's kind of something that's been passed down to myself and my brother to hold, cherish, and keep amazing for 20, 30, 40, 50 years to come. And that's the 2012 Toyota Tacoma double cab, long bed, four-wheel drive. Now we're getting into the final car on this list, at least of cars that I have owned up to this point publicly, and that is the 2002 Lexus LS430. And I bought this car a few months ago off of the second owner, and this car only has 75,000 original miles on it, which is so low for this model of car. Usually when you go online to research these cars, if there's any for sale, they have at least 150,000 miles on them, going all the way north of 300,000 miles. And they're just really hard to find in low mile, good condition. And I found one that was just that. A really low mile, really well preserved, beautiful Lexus LS430 in this crystal white 3-stage paint job. It has a lot of bells and whistles on the inside that honestly most modern cars don't even have nowadays. And it's just an amazing car. It's so smooth driving, it's so elegant, and I get a lot of compliments on the LS430, which I really wasn't expecting out of a car that low key. And that is the final car as of this point that I have owned on the JJ Vids channel, and just as a whole, from getting my driver's license, being 16 years old, up until right now, sharing it with you guys. And if you guys enjoyed this type of content and video, please be sure to like this video, subscribe to the JJ Vids channel, turn on the notification bell, never miss out on a future video. And remember, you guys, we are getting really close to the 500 subscriber giveaway. Make sure you guys read the description below to get dialed in with that so you guys can have a chance to win. And with that being said, thank you all for watching today's video. I'll see you next time, and cheers.